this time, I'd like to call our meeting to order at 7 p.m. Our first agenda item tonight is approval of past minutes. Since we had our last 3 meetings, I believe, were virtual, we like to approve these minutes in person. As I said, everybody should have copies there. We're just going to go with a mass approval, and if I can have somebody with a motion to approve the minutes from January the 11th.
I'll motion to approve.
I'm not done. November the 2nd and December the 7th.
January 11th.
January the 11th, November the 2nd, and December the 2nd. I read them out of order.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. And a second, thank you, Ginger. Thank you, sir. Okay, and we will now take a vote just by raising of the hand to approve the minutes from the last 3 general sessions, unless anybody would like to raise objections and have any changes. No changes, we go ahead and vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, looks like unanimous consent. The meeting minutes from November, December, and January are approved. Next, we have board member Melissa Owens here tonight to give the Board of Education update.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening. How is everybody tonight? So, thanks for having me out. It's always a pleasure to come back to CAC meetings / U-46. What is it? U-46 Unite. Did I get that right? Or Unite U-46? Okay. Sorry. So I have just a few updates for you tonight. The first, February, is Black History Month, and many of our schools are hosting programs, displays, and activities to mark this important event. So be sure to watch the district's Facebook and Instagram pages for photos and more information about those events. The U-46 Educational Foundation needs help in spreading the word about their great scholarship opportunities that they manage, some of which are worth up to $4,000 and more. The foundation offers a convenient Common App scholarship for students to be considered for up to 10 scholarships in one easy-to-use application. However, the deadline is rapidly approaching. The deadline is March 1st. So if you know any high school seniors, please let them know about this opportunity and have them visit u-46.org/foundation for more information. Also, if you are interested in helping review those applications, which is a large process to go through, the Educational Foundation would love to have your help. You can contact their coordinator, Jean Bednar, also at that URL. That's u-46.org/foundation. Who here is familiar with the 5 Essential Survey? Awesome. So that survey launched this week and will close on March 29th. The survey is based on more than 20 years of research by the University of Chicago Consortium on 5 components found to be critical for school success. The district is focused on asking all teachers, 4th through 12th grade students, and all parents to complete the survey between now and March 1st. So on behalf of the board, I strongly suggest or encourage you to complete the survey. It's completely confidential, and most importantly, your feedback helps guide student improvement for everyone in U-46. I know that those parent survey results aren't posted on the Illinois School Report Card. However, the district and the schools do get that feedback back. So any feedback that they get is obviously helpful for their planning, so we really encourage you to go and fill out those surveys. For the survey link and more information, visit u-46.org/5essentials. And finally, I have a couple of calendar dates to remind you of. Monday, February 19th is President's Day, which is a federal holiday, and obviously it's a student non-attendance day. All U-46 buildings will be closed on that day. And our next regular board meeting is scheduled for Monday, February 26th at the Educational Services Center in Elgin. Our meetings are also streamed on YouTube, And pertinent to this meeting, I will just call your attention to the fact that as a board, we are getting monthly updates on our facilities planning. And so with the discussions that you're going to have tonight, call your attention to those board meetings because you'll be able to see then the conversations that the board is having on some of the same subjects that you'll be covering tonight. And with that, that's all I have. Thanks again for having me, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Owens, and I want to welcome everyone to tonight's event. Appreciate all of you for coming out this evening on a Thursday night, and I know it feels a little bit more like a spring evening with the thunder and the lightning, and what a difference a month makes. So a month ago, it was the first day of second half of the year, and we were monitoring winter weather, go figure. So tonight we have feels like spring weather, and I really appreciate everyone being here. Before we get started though tonight with some additional announcements, I would like to introduce some other board members who have also joined us this evening. So to begin, I'd like to introduce our Board of Education President, Ms. Sue Kerr. We're all towards the back. We also have our Board of Education Secretary, Ms. Kate Thomas. And a very familiar face to CAC, one of our newest board members, Ms. Shonda Schwartz. We also have a number of our cabinet members here as well, and I know they're kind of sprinkled around the room with us this evening. So to begin, a face that I know you all recognize for our Unite U-46 work, we have Mr. Brian Lindholm, our Chief of Staff. We also have Dr. Ann Williams, our Deputy Superintendent of Operations. Seated next to her is Ms. Lella Majstorovic, our Deputy Superintendent of Instruction. We also have our Chief Legal Officer, Tricia Olson. Our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mark Moore. I know I saw our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Annette Acevedo. And Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Dr. Frank Williams, in the way back. We also have a cast of, it's going to feel like hundreds of other administrators here this evening, including many of your principals, current or past, in our session tonight. We have executive directors, coordinators, and as we get to work, I know that they will join all of you at your tables as well. So I appreciate all of our administrators for being here with us as well tonight. Thank you. I do have a few announcements. So number one, I need to make sure everybody here is well aware that we have a new state championship team in U-46. Woo! Yes! So South Elgin High School, our co-ed cheer team, claimed the state title over the weekend. Roll Storm. Second victory for co-ed state level cheerleading for this team. So I think we have a dynasty in the works with South Elgin High School. And we do look forward to recognizing them at a board meeting coming to you in the very near future. So that's terribly exciting. But before our kids can get to the point where they are competing and winning state titles at South Elgin High School, we have to get them registered in kindergarten. And so that is currently, did you catch that transition? Where's Carla? I just made Carla super proud. She's been working with me, and I'm proud to say I'm coming along. It is underway. If you have a child or know of a child in your neighborhood who's going to turn 5 by September 1st of 2024, you should start by visiting u-46.org/registration to start that online registration process. And you can see the schedule for kindergarten preview events. We're very excited that this year we're returning to welcoming our kindergartners and their families into our buildings. It's been a little while with COVID since we've done that type of initiative, so we're really excited. Each elementary school is holding a kindergarten preview during the week of February 12th. And they will be offering kindergarten parents the opportunity to meet the principal, learn about our full-day kindergarten play, our full-day play-based kindergarten program, and also get tips on how we can help our youngest learners transition into our elementary schools to start the year. Having our families register now will help make sure that we are ready to welcome all of our kindergartners next year. So please help us get the word out in your neighborhoods and with your family members as well. Speaking of registration, you can register all of your students at one time. So if you're ready to register that kindergartner, you can register all of your students who are returning for our 24-25 school year as well. And the early registration helps make sure, again, that we have everything that we need to welcome your students at the first day of school. And that includes making sure that we have staff ready to greet them, we have transportation ready to pick them up, and we have all of our schedules and resources that we need. So please do not delay, and again, visit our registration website to do that. And now I think I'm going to return it back to CAC.
Yes, I think so.
All right, thanks, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okay, the next agenda item will be a brief opportunity for public comment. I would remind you folks that we will be getting into the meat of tonight's meeting, the Unite U-46 session, where you'll have plenty of time to share your thoughts, not only with the folks at the table, but the district here as well. So if anybody would like to come up at this time, you have 3 minutes to make a public comment. You're free to do so. Okay, going once, going twice. Awesome, thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to our business agenda, our committee updates. And Heather, would you care to do instructional initiatives first?
Thank you. So I am Heather Matthews. I am parent of a 5-year-old and 9-year-old at Centennial. Great to see a fantastic turnout tonight. If you do not know Community Advisory Council, we encourage you to join. You will hear this from all of us who are members. If you're here tonight, you are our kind of people. You are people who are engaged in your kids' education, care about what's going on in the district, stuff like that. So that's exactly what we dig into. So Ian and I co-chair Instructional Initiatives Committee, and so we have, our next meeting will be Wednesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. on Zoom. We will be continuing our results and reflection series, where we're going through a lot of the key initiatives that the district has launched over the past several years, and looking at what the results are, reflecting on, are we seeing the impacts we expected to see? If not, how can we improve them further? And so this meeting will focus on our foreign language initiatives. So the dual language program, the changes to foreign language at the high school, also how foreign language is going at the middle school. So we've also looked this year at the impact of the changes to the magnet application process, which was great to see. We got awesome data last time, showing that we've improved the percentage of free and reduced lunch students who are getting accepted to the magnet academies. We've seen great data there. And we've looked at U-46 rising outcomes and measures as well. So hope to have you there. And like I said, we'll be doing foreign language next on Zoom, Wednesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. And the link is on the district website. Did I miss anything, Ian? Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather. Next up is Ginger and Sarah with our Specialized Student Services.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Siddiqui,
Ginger McHugh-Kurtz.
and we are part of the Specialized Student Services Committee. We are here to talk about our next presentation, which is on February 27th. It is a virtual program about transitions, and we're going to be having people from U-46, our staff, doing a short presentation through Zoom, and they will talk about the transition from preschool to kindergarten, and then from elementary school to middle school, and then middle school to high school, and then high school to the transition program. And then after that short presentation, we'll have breakout rooms where you can ask specific questions to the specific group that you're interested in talking to. So it is an online, it's completely Zoom, so anyone can join, you can just listen. I think it's gonna be a really interesting program.
So along with that, if you're not sure what transitions are or what specialized student services is, if you have a child that has a 504 or an IEP, or you're the guardian of someone that has that, that's what this group focuses on. And so these transitions are when a child is making the next big step in their educational career. And there's some information that you need to know before those changes occur. So we'd love for you to join us, and we'd love for you to join us at our meetings. Everything's online because we have kids with special needs, and so we need to be at home as much as possible. So if anyone's interested, come and talk to us, and we'd love to have you at our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, thank you. Great presentations they give, I highly recommend it. Many of their presentations aren't particularly for specialized student services only. They're great for general ed as well, just keep that in mind. So those are our committee updates. In the past, we've had lots of other committees with the U-46 Advisory Council, boundaries being probably one of the most ones, which I can tell is high on everybody's mind tonight. So something to think about in the future. So as far as other business goes, I would just like to give you a brief idea. You know, Heather's touched on it, but U-46, the Community Advisory Council, we've been around for more than half a century. We spawn board members, you know, and other, is that the right word? Yeah. I'm hanging around my kids playing Minecraft too much. You know, so it's really an opportunity for you to meet the administrations, to have those kind of hats-on conversations. You know, we really did struggle over COVID and all that, and Zoom meetings, you know, they're great for some stuff, but it's really great to see everybody's face. You know, afterwards you can meet other parents, meet other community members in the districts, hobnob and talk and shake hands. So we're glad to have you out here tonight. You know, our goal is to advise and assist the Board of Education. And every school in the district, you can have 5 community advisory members. So there's plenty of room for everybody. And you know, if you don't think you can contribute, you can. If you just want to come and visit us, that's fine as well. We do have a few more meetings coming up, and those are March 7th, we'll have an early childhood update at our general meeting. April 4th will be another Unite U-46 session, and then May 2nd is reports and elections of officers. So if you want to come up here and talk to everybody, I'm willing to resign my post for that. I thank everybody, and if there is any other business that anybody would like to bring up through Community Advisory Council, we can do that now. Or I will make a motion to adjourn, and I just need a second for that, and then we'll move on to the Unite U-46 session. A second. Awesome. Thank you very much.
So again, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight as we get started on our Unite U-46 engagement session. So as we begin, we've got the agendas up and around. I won't read the entire agenda to you. It's great to see so many returning faces. Some of you have not missed a session in well over a year. We appreciate that. Some of you have come back to us now that this is our topic finally, so we appreciate you for that as well. But I know we will spend a little bit of time then also reviewing some of the recent recommendations and some of the progress of this group before we get right to the work of this evening. So we will be working on boundary planning criteria and guidelines tonight. And we will also share some of the tools that we utilize when we initiate this work and move all the way, right, from start to finish. And then we will be asking you to give us some input and direction as we have these conversations this evening. So as you will likely recall, we brought forward some middle school recommendations earlier this year. In the fall, we brought forward recommendations to retire 2 of our oldest middle schools, Abbott Middle School and Ellis Middle School. This was approved by the Board of Education, as I mentioned, prior to winter break. We also brought forward recommendations for additions to Kenyon Woods and Kimball Middle School as well. They're both situated, large areas of land, have opportunity for us to build out and still maintain enough space and enough green space to be able to welcome more students. And finally, the recommendation for the construction of a new middle school in Elgin. Yes, something that has not happened in many, many years. And so we're very excited, of course, about that work. And then we also just recently brought forward recommendations to the Board of Education concerning elementary schools. And that again was an agenda item on our February 5th meeting just this past Monday evening. So these are some of our recommendations for elementary. We have had 3 buildings that we certainly have gotten great mileage out of and been phenomenal stewards of tax dollar money, dating back to the 1880s for 2 of them and the 1890s for 1 of them. So when we look at McKinley and Washington and Lowry, we know that they have been cornerstones, literally, of neighborhoods in the school district and in the city of Elgin for some time. But knowing that we needed to update the instructional space in those buildings, and we're limited based on footprint, and we're limited based on what you can actually do in some of those buildings of that age, we've made the recommendation to retire those buildings in June of 2027. So that's at the end of the 26-27 school year. We are currently researching considerations and options then for whether we are going to build new, renovate, bring forward additions to other buildings as well. As you will all likely recall, we've spent a lot of time also talking about our diminishing enrollment and the fact that we expect to continue to see that enrollment diminish. So it's an investment in our facilities, and it's an update to our facilities, knowing that there are some we can also retire and we don't have to rebuild. We also brought forward some recommendations as well for 3 other elementary schools. Century Oaks, also located on the west side of Elgin, and a recommendation to retire Century Oaks, with consideration again whether there will be a rebuild, an addition, or renovations to other buildings to welcome students on the west side of Elgin to an updated elementary school. We've also made the recommendation to retire and rebuild then a school in Streamwood. Glenbrook is the building that we've recommended that we retire, and we are currently researching our abilities to rebuild on that plot of land for Glenbrook, or even the potential of another location in Streamwood for those students. I say that because any of you who are familiar with that location, it looks like there's a lot of land around Glenbrook Elementary School. Truth be told, Streamwood Park District owns most of it. Most of it is very low-lying as well, and so we have to do some additional research to find out what the feasibility is to rebuild exactly on that same footprint, or to rebuild next to that footprint, right? We'd like to minimize transition as much as possible, but we have to look at what our options are when we're looking at building those new schools. And then finally, we made a recommendation as well to retire Hanover Countryside also. And again, we are working through all of those finalized recommendations to the Board of Education as far as what comes next in those neighborhoods to support and welcome our students. Those will be coming forward later this spring. There is not an exact date listed there for you just yet. We also had a couple of other recommendations that came forward. One involves a feasibility study for Illinois Park Early Learning Center. Illinois Park Early Learning Center was originally built as an elementary school in U-46 in 1999. It was open for several years and then closed. Closed for a variety of reasons. One of the areas that we need to review and research with that feasibility study is about traffic flow to and from the school. It is located on the west side of Elgin. It's one of our newest elementary schools, and it's located at McLean and Wing Street. So because of where it's located currently, what the entrance and exit routes in and around the property look like, it can create some challenges. So our question is, can that be changed to improve traffic flow and make that an accessible site again to bring forward the potential of returning that location to an elementary school on the west side of Elgin? That's a question we're currently researching, and you will see that come forward to the Board of Education this spring. Additionally then, we know that, as I've referenced, with retiring McKinley on the northeast side of Elgin, we see still a really solid and consistent enrollment in that area. So one of our questions, right, is that new elementary school in the northeast area of Elgin, as well as I've referenced, potentially another elementary school or a new elementary school in Streamwood and Hanover Park area. So one of our considerations, though, goes back to Parkwood Elementary School. Your first recommendation was that Parkwood would be retired and rebuilt. As we have continued to monitor, though, enrollment in that area, as well as visiting all of our buildings, we've talked about those DLR studies where we've gone into all of our middle schools, all of our elementary schools, confirming how many students they hold, confirming what the space, like libraries, media centers, commons areas, all look like. We've identified that for now, our recommendation will be to continue to monitor Parkwood for possible consolidation in the future. So it's not a retirement and a rebuild, but we're going to monitor this area. One of the reasons we're monitoring this area is that within about a mile and then a mile and a half, you have two other elementary schools from this location in walking distance in the Hanover Park area. So we also have Laurel Hill Elementary and we also have Ontarioville. So we're going to continue to monitor so we can bring forward a recommendation in the future, and we will continue to share that information as we move forward. And then finally, we had two other recommendations. The potential for additions and renovations at Harriet Gifford and Highland Elementary Schools, also on the west side of Elgin. So as we've made some recommendations to retire two of our oldest buildings on the west side of Elgin, again, doing some research into the potential for additions and renovations at two of our newer elementaries on the west side of Elgin to be able to welcome students to those sites. So that is work that we have ahead of us. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to someone who I know will do a much better job of managing this, our Chief of Staff, Brian Lindholm.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Brian Lindholm. I'm the Chief of Staff for the district. I probably should have told her that this one only controlled that screen. We have this whole like man behind the curtain kind of thing going on, so we have a couple different laptops driving two screens, so sorry about that. So tonight, as Dr. Johnson had said, we kind of want to cover where we've been and then where we're going. So as she mentioned, it's great to see many of you who've been at some of the previous sessions. We've now, I think, done 7 or 8 of these over the last couple of years, leading up to the referendum, and then since the referendum, we just kind of kept rolling them forward. So this year, in the fall, we talked about an audit that we did of all of our elementary buildings, particularly starting in some of our oldest elementary schools and the elementary schools that were flagged as most in need of being updated when we did the original building assessments as far back as 2020, 2021. So we had a session where we actually had one of our architects in. She shared some of the findings from these visits that we had done really across the district. We had the oldest, like 24 of our elementary schools, and it was with architects, it was with construction managers. We took our Board of Education to many of our schools, and we presented some of the findings and the themes that we saw. And then the next step, well, this is tricky. The next step then was to determine how many elementary schools we would need. Because as we've discussed, we do have a declining enrollment in the district. We are down several thousand students from our peak already this year. And unfortunately, based on the incoming classes of kindergartners that we have, we expect to see the enrollment continue to decline for at least the next several years before it would stabilize. The other thing with the elementary schools is that when we move 6th grade to the middle schools, that's another like 2,500 students that then all, at the drop of a hat, all move out of our elementary schools into the middle schools. So if we thought we had a lot of space in our elementary schools today, we would have even more if we didn't take action and try to consolidate some of our under-enrolled elementary schools. So we walked you through that process, and we kind of previewed the recommendations that were going to come to the board with specific guidance on which buildings should be renovated, rebuilt, or retired. And that's what Dr. Johnson just walked through. We presented to the board just before the winter break, and they did approve those recommendations just this Monday night. So now we're able to continue with some of that important work. And so then tonight, you know, that the item at the bottom, that kind of takes us to the point we're at now, where once some of these decisions are made and we know where we're going to have schools and we know how many schools we're going to have in the district, then we're at a point where we can start redrawing boundaries, which I know everyone's been kind of anxious to hear more information about that. We're now at a point tonight where we would like, we're not going to be drawing lines on maps tonight. I hope that doesn't disappoint anybody. But we are going to be asking you that as we go about this, what types of things should we be prioritizing? There's lots of different considerations, and we really want to hear from you. We'll share some of the work that was done previously. We'll share some of our thoughts, but we definitely want to get your feedback. That's really the point of these sessions. So the process then that will follow, here we are tonight, again, reviewing some of the established criteria and getting your feedback and making any necessary adjustments or refinements to the criteria and the guidelines that we'll use to go about the work. And then the next thing that we'll do is share those recommendations with the Board of Education, including any changes that we recommend to the guidelines that were put in place the last time that U-46 set about looking at boundaries across the district. And then we'll be at a point, once we have those criteria determined, where then we can start actually drawing boundaries on maps and having some scenarios and some different versions of boundary maps that we could share in these types of sessions and then also share with the Board of Education. And then once our recommendations are presented to the board, we would ask for their approval. And then finally, once they would approve our recommendations, then we're able to share those out officially with the communities, with all the impacted families, neighborhoods, staff members, anyone else in U-46 that would be impacted by the changes. We would schedule a series of sessions where we'd go out and meet with parents, meet with students in the schools, and make sure that we did all of that more than a year in advance. So that's been our commitment all along, is that anytime there are going to be boundary changes, they will be announced, they will be approved, finalized, and announced a year or more in advance. Okay? So for tonight, what we wanted to confirm with all of you is the first boundary change that will be coming forward is going to be limited to the new middle school that's going to be opening in Bartlett at the former Hawk Hollow Elementary site. And the reason for that is because we already broke ground on that school. Any of you who live in the area, there is heavy construction going on there now every day. The occupancy for that school is scheduled for next fall, so August of 2025. So that's going to be ready a year ahead of when a lot of the other big projects that we've undertaken, as well as the shift of 6th grade to the middle schools, that all happens a year later. That's August of 2026, okay? So we had originally thought maybe we would try to do all the middle school boundaries this year, and we could bring those all forward. And what we realized pretty quickly, and I hope that as we go through this activity tonight, I hope this makes more sense to all of you, is that we were afraid that if we did that, and then one of the criteria that we were told that we should try to honor is to keep the feeder patterns as clean as we could. And when I say feeder patterns, I mean the same kids from the elementary schools all go to the same middle school, and then they all go to the same high school. Versus sometimes in elementary school, we get splintered off in 2 or 3 middle schools, or middle school to 2 or 3 high schools. And I think we were afraid if we established all the middle school boundaries this year, and then we go back and reset the elementary boundaries, we could have clean feeder patterns for a year that are then broken next year if an elementary boundary shifts. Because we're certainly not going to go back and redo the middle school boundaries again a year later. So because that shift doesn't happen until August of 2026, we're still 2.5 years away. So I think what we decided was, let's focus on the new school to open at Hawk Hollow Elementary, because to give that 12 months notice, we really need to get that in front of the board and get it out to the communities this spring. It'll give us a chance to go through these steps, kind of follow the process that I just described, and then what we'll do is come back next fall. We'll be working on boundaries for the rest of the district, and that will be at all 3 levels. So I know some of you tonight were interested about high school boundaries. We will be looking at high school boundaries as well. And so then we would be able to have some decisions made, as Dr. Johnson had mentioned, in terms of elementary schools that we're still trying to figure out if we're going to be able to rebuild on site, if we're going to have to acquire other land, if we're going to consolidate schools. Those decisions really all need to be made. But once those are made, then we really would start tackling these district-wide boundaries, and that would be the focus then of next school year. And the idea would be we would come forward even earlier in the spring, so more like this time next year, we'd be coming forward with boundary recommendations for the fall of 26, and that would, again, impact many schools at all levels kind of across the district. So I hope that makes sense, but for this spring, the specific boundary recommendation that we bring forward is just for the one new middle school to open in Bartlett. There's also a note at the bottom of the page here, in case any of you guys live in that part of the district and are curious what that first year could look like. We're still determining exactly what that opening year and that transition might be. It is very likely that we may open that school with just 7th grade that year. And the reason would be because we would not be prepared to shift the 6th graders just into that school, because we're going to do that all at the same time, and some of the other schools wouldn't be ready. We actually still have a lot of work around the curriculum, the teaming model. So really, we're not going to be ready to do that until August of 26th. But if you're an 8th grader that year, I think it makes sense to allow those kids to finish their middle school career at whatever school they had started. There's no reason to do another transition where they'd go to this new school for 8th grade, then go to a high school for 9th grade. So the plan right now, while very tentative, and all the details still need to be worked out, we still need to come and present this to the board, but the tentative scenario that we present here is that we would open that school with just 7th grade that first year, okay? Okay, so the next part of the presentation tonight then, we thought it was important to look at both the board policies that we have in place that address attendance boundaries, and then we really wanted to spend more time looking at the last time that this work was taken on in U-46 at this sort of level. So we did go back to the last time it actually was done through CAC. CAC previously had an enrollment and facilities committee, and they were tasked with working with administration. This was 2009-2010, to prepare a report with recommendations on boundary adjustments that was presented to the Board of Education. There was a lot of really good work that was done in this. When I went back and read through the report, I was very impressed. There was a lot of people who were involved, and then they really put out a high-quality report. The Board of Education did ultimately approve the guidelines and the criteria that they put forward. We did not end up doing widespread boundary changes like we almost certainly will this time. But in terms of sort of setting the stage for how that work would have unfolded, should the district have taken that decision, there was a lot of good work there that I think we need to at least honor as the starting point here, and let us sort of respond and react to that and make adjustments to the established guidelines versus starting from scratch. So we will spend some of the time tonight going through that report. But first, the board policies. So the board policies, there's 3 of them that have to do with attendance boundaries. The first is sharing enrollment projections every year. This is something that we typically do in the fall. As of September 30th, we take what's considered like our official enrollment for the school year and report it to the state of Illinois. And that is because it gives us time to have kids who may be registered but never showed up. We end up unenrolling them so they're not in our numbers. It also gives us enough time to count some of the kids who we didn't know were coming, who show up 2 weeks into the school year because maybe they had been away for the summer and they come back and they end up in our schools. We make sure that those kids are on our enrollment counts. So that's something we certainly do, and at the same time, we adjust our forecasts going forward. That's always something that we share with the board. We'll talk more tonight about kind of all the things that go into that enrollment forecast, because that's such an important input into the whole process. The other board policy has to do with establishing boundaries and recommending any required changes. So we have been getting more into this in recent years. Last year, we retired 2 of our elementary schools, Hawk Hollow as an elementary school, so that it could be converted to middle school, as we talked about. And then the other one is Garfield Elementary in Elgin, was retired after last year. So we did have to go through this process to recommend those boundary changes, follow the established board policy here. The other interesting thing that I thought in this board policy as I was rereading it is it specifically asks administration to look at drawing boundary lines to ensure that we are not segregating students based on race or ethnicity. So that's something that we get into tonight in terms of an important consideration as we draw boundaries could be to have schools that represent the diversity of our district. And then the final board policy that I think at least maybe indirectly addresses establishing attendance boundaries has to do with working with local authorities around things like zoning and planning commissions. It really has to do with when we're doing additions, when we're doing new construction, and it's certainly something that we are doing now and that we'll continue to do to work with those local agencies. Okay, so now what we're going to do, this is our first little mini work activity for tonight. So we're going to pause for just a few minutes. At your table, you should all have some index cards, and if you could all grab one of those index cards. And before I go into the recommendations or the guidelines from the last report, we'd like to hear just what you came to this meeting tonight with sort of top of mind in terms of things that you would hope the district would be considering as we go to look at redrawing boundaries across the district. So there's no right or wrong answers, and we kind of wanted to hear from you first before we got into the previous report, because we'd like to hear some ideas that maybe are completely different from what was considered before, or maybe completely different even from things that we had been considering. So you could say things like, don't draw boundary lines down the middle of any neighborhoods or subdivisions. That could be one. You could say, I want to have kids be able to walk to schools, more neighborhood schools, less time on buses. It could be about, more diverse schools, but anything that you could come up with. There's no wrong answers. So I'm going to stop talking here. If you guys could all jot down a few ideas in the index cards, and then we'll use them for the activity later, okay? All right, we'll come back in a few minutes then. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Carla. I knew this was the danger, right? Was that we turn you guys loose, and I know that talking to each other is like the best part. So this is the challenge. Hello, am I talking? You guys hear me?
Yep.
Hello. All right. Let's try to get everybody back together here so we can get to the main work activity. This was just sort of the warm-up act, okay? So as we described before, when U-46 has gone about looking at adjusting boundaries district-wide, every time we've done this, there's been heavy community involvement. So last time, as I said, the Enrollment Facilities Committee, a part of CAC, really, I would say, kind of co-authored the report, and it looked to me like had a very, very heavy role in putting these recommendations together. So because that committee is not functioning this year under CAC, they've graciously kind of worked with us to allow us to co-opt some of these meetings with Unite U-46, and I think this is the closest thing we have to like an enrollment facilities kind of committee in terms of drawing feedback from the community. So it is really, really encouraging that so many of you are here tonight, and I can tell you've got a lot of thoughts you want to share with us, so I'm very anxious to hear what you came with. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through one at a time, and these are the 10 guidelines that were listed in the report that the Enrollment Facilities Committee created in 2009-2010. Now, my understanding from reading the report is these are not in like any particular order. So the one that I put up here first, that's to do with mobile classrooms, does not mean this was their highest priority. It just means it was the first one listed, okay? But the first criteria then was when we look at capacities for each school, to exclude the mobile classrooms. And the way I take this means like get out of all the mobiles. We don't want any mobiles in U-46, okay? So when this report was written 15 years ago, the enrollment was in the district was going in a different direction. Where that was probably close to our peak at 41,000. And you can see, if you can see these small numbers, we had a lot more mobiles and a lot more mobile classrooms then than we do now. But the number is not zero now. We still have buildings that have mobile classrooms. And I tell you what, in some cases, they've been there so long that it's almost like they're just an extension of the building. The schools wouldn't want to give them up because those are additional classrooms that they use every year. They have teachers who like being in the mobiles. And so when you look at the capacity for a building, like those are classrooms they count on using every year. So I guess by listing this as a criteria, and this is one of the things we'd like to hear from you, is if one of the guidelines is get out of mobiles, have zero mobiles in U-46, then we would know that that's something that we should plan for. And we would look at the capacities for these schools, we would not count those mobile classrooms as additional places to set up classrooms. The next one says current and projected enrollments disaggregated by student groups. So this was when No Child Left Behind was in effect. That was replaced in 2015 by ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. So No Child Left Behind had very specific student groups that they asked that we would disaggregate the enrollments by. We could now choose to do different student groups, but I think the intention again here would be, as we look at our enrollments in the different buildings, should we be concerned at making sure that our schools are more represented, all of our schools are more representative of the diversity of our district. So if that is considered to be a priority, that is certainly something then that we would consider, and it would have an impact on how the boundaries are drawn. So the next one is distance and travel time of students from a school, okay? So while this one sounds like really self-explanatory, there's actually even lots of wrinkles in terms of kind of what could cause a kid to have to sit on a bus for a long time in the mornings and in the afternoons. So one of the things that we'll get into later certainly could be, do we have more neighborhood schools that are located right where there are clusters of population and more kids would be able to walk? Because then their travel time on a bus becomes zero, right? They're walking to a school. Versus, are we okay having kids riding a bus for a few miles to attend a more modern, updated school? Because that's certainly another way that we can serve our students. The other thing that comes into play here sometimes are program placement decisions, because in many cases in U-46, if we need to open new classrooms for a given program, unfortunately it's where do we have the space? And sometimes it may not be in a building that's very close to where most of those kids live. So then we have kids that are spending a lot of time riding a bus to get to the building that happens to be hosting their program. And if it's a specialized student services program, those could be some of our more vulnerable students that it's not a great way to start their day to have them ride a bus for 40 minutes. I was talking with Jeff Brawl over here about sharing stories about some of our kids and even the impacts that it has on our own students and on our own families' lives. My daughter is a freshman in high school in a neighboring district, and she gets on a bus at 6:15 every morning now. So and part of it is the boundaries, because the high school is a lot further from her house than the middle school was previously. I know part of it has to do with start times, because the high school starts early, middle school starts really late. But she's spending a lot of time on a bus as well, because the school doesn't start till 7:30 and they're picking her up at 6:15. So I hear a lot from her about how much sleep she's losing, and can't I just drive her to school? And I'll suggest, well, you could go to bed earlier, but she doesn't like that option either. So but it does. It has an impact on the experience that our kids are having, and if that is something that we're asked to take into strong account and to try to minimize wherever possible, again, that would have some implications on how we would draw boundaries. I talked about feeder school alignment. I hope this makes sense. This would just be the idea if you had a clean feeder pattern, every kid from, say, those 6 elementary schools at the bottom of the chart, they would all attend the same middle school. And then every kid from that middle school would all attend the same high school. That would be an example of a perfectly clean feeder pattern. The opposite would be if those elementary schools splintered off and went to a few different middle schools, or the middle schools splintered off and went to, say, 2 different high schools. So this is actually probably one of the more important considerations, that we need to know how important this is. Because if this is an important priority, we can do it, but it makes I don't want to say it ties our hands, but it reduces some of our flexibility, I guess, in drawing boundaries, because we would be trying to assign entire elementary schools to the same middle school, entire middle schools to the same high school. But if that's a priority, we need to know that, because that has big implications on how the boundaries are drawn. And when we show you the demonstration of the boundary mapping tool, which I hope that it's going to be effective and that you guys will appreciate some of the fairly sophisticated tools that we have to use here. But it looks very different if you're drawing boundaries based on streets and rivers and railroads and things, and trying to kind of manually draw your boundaries, versus if we just say, click, 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 these 5 elementary schools all go to this middle school. And then we have to get more creative with sort of making the numbers work. But again, we want to hear from you as to how important you feel this is, that kids would stay together with the same general group of students geographically from elementary to middle to high school. Okay, and then the next one, maybe this is sort of the opposite, would be instead we could make sure that all of our boundaries honor natural boundaries such as wetlands, railroad tracks, forest preserves, main thoroughfares. We do this to a sense in U-46 today. We have very few school boundaries that say cross the Fox River. Generally, a school is either east or west of the river. There's a couple exceptions, but in general, the river is a dividing line. So are things like Route 59, McLean Boulevard. We don't have a lot of boundaries that cross those sort of main, very busy roads either. And it makes sense. I mean, for transportation efficiencies, student safety, there's a lot of reasons. But that is certainly something that we can honor as we draw these boundaries, is to make sure that we minimize the number of times that a school boundary crosses over these types of things. Okay, double check, I am still in sync here. The opportunity for siblings to attend the same school, where this comes into play is if you have one student in the house who is not attending their assigned home school, based on their home address, because they're attending another school for gifted or for dual language or one of our magnet academies or specialized student services. The consideration then is, what do we do for the siblings in that house? Do we allow them to also attend the same school to make transportation and arranging schedules and stuff easier for the families? If we allow them to attend the other school, do we say, but you have to provide your own transportation? That's how some other districts do it. So I mean, there's lots of options here. I think we just want to hear from you as to how important of consideration that should be, because we know that could be, could be a big implication for some of our families. Over and under capacity utilization. We've shared these numbers at almost every one of these sessions this year. And when I say capacity utilization, it's basically how many students is the school serving versus how many could the school serve based on the number and the size of the classrooms, the size of the gymnasium, the cafeteria, the library. So if you have a school that really was designed to have a capacity of 400 and they have 200 students today, the utilization would be 50%, right? Easy math. So what the chart there shows is that based on our current elementary schools, if we didn't do anything, if we kept all 38 elementary schools that we have now, this is what our capacity utilization would look like. And you see all the schools that are in the darker blue or the sort of royal blue there, those would all be running like 50 or 60% capacity. And then you see we still have a couple that are in the red or the pink, which are saying those schools are basically at or slightly above even their full capacity. So one of the things that we'd be looking to do as we redraw these boundaries is to balance that across the district. We really should have a lot of our schools running like 80, 85% full. That's really where we'd like to see majority of our schools. So that would be like the gray color on a chart like this. Okay, we're gonna get into this a little bit more in a few minutes, but this is like an example of one of the inputs into our enrollment forecast. So it says projected growth in the area and future school facilities. So I will get this question quite a bit, is they'll say, well, do you know about this new development that's going across from Liberty Elementary? And I just want to make sure that, like, you guys all know, like, yes, we do, and that's built into the numbers. So I wasn't saying it to be dismissive. I want to make sure, like, that it is all factored in, where we know that there are new housing starts. In fact, in some cases, we talk to the developers and they've got their own math about it's going to be this many single-family homes, this many starter homes, and it's 0.2 school-age kids for each of these units, and they've got all these numbers in terms of how many potential U-46 students we should expect, and that's all factored in. So I just want to make sure that is clear to you that like, yes, we know where these developments are going in, and that is all factored into our forecast. And it's going to have a big impact on how the boundaries are drawn, because you could have a school that right now is well under capacity, but we know there's a bunch of new homes going in, so we will make sure that we plan for that and that it isn't taken into account. Okay, the next one, and I think this will kind of come to life when we show you the demo of the software tool in a few minutes here as well. This is kind of a neat visual, because what it shows you is where students in our district live. So that it's a map of U-46, and all those little pink dots, those are addresses where our students live. So this is pulled from the geographic information system that we use to do all of our boundary mapping. And if you see a bigger dot somewhere, that means maybe it's a apartment complex where there's lots of students at that same address, versus the smaller dots are probably single-family homes where maybe you have one student or two students. But what you can really see is like, man, are there clusters that are like so heavily populated, and then we have other areas where we don't have any students, right, for square miles in the district. And I tell you, where it makes a lot of sense, you guys probably are ahead of me on this already, is that like, yeah, they're forest preserves, right, or they're wetlands, or they are industrial parks. So there are areas where there just aren't a lot of residences. The other thing, every once in a while, we'll get, we'll trip ourselves up here where we'll say, man, there's a lot of homes there. Why do we not have any students? And we'll realize like it's a senior living facility or something, right? I guess that makes sense, right? Yeah. But anyway, you can see in looking at this is not like even distribution, anything from it. Even areas like in the southern part of the district in Wayne, probably no surprise, but like look at how much more distributed those students are across a really wide geographic area compared to some of the areas in Elgin, Bartlett, Streamwood, where we've got, literally thousands of kids who are clustered, within a couple square miles. Okay, this one, I feel like this is a really important one, and it goes back to a point I made a few minutes ago, is stability of attendance boundaries and to avoid changes in 2 consecutive years. So this says 2 consecutive years, but I think I would extend this even to say, once we change a boundary, I would want to say that that boundary is going to stay for that area for several years at least. So the example that I used here was Garfield. We just retired Garfield Elementary, and those students were reassigned either to Huff in the south, in the blue area, or they were assigned to Channing to the north, the students in the green area. When we look at redrawing elementary attendance boundaries, I would propose that we don't touch either of those, and those kids would stay at Channing and Huff, because they just transitioned to a new school this year. For us to come back 2 years from now and say, oops, now you're not going there anymore, you're going to a different school again, to me that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I think that, but again, I want to hear from you if you agree, but I think this idea of keeping some stability and continuity and minimizing transitions makes a lot of sense to me at least. Okay, so those were the 10 criteria that were listed in the previous report. So when we get to the activity here in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to kind of react and respond to those criteria that were listed and sort of how they resonate with you or not, as well as to pull back out your cards. And I want you to share with other people on your table ideas maybe that you came up with that were separate and apart and maybe did not overlap a lot with some of what you heard here, okay? But that's the activity that we're going to get to in a minute. Right now, what I'd like to do, I'm going to introduce Mark Moore, who's our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Mark is going to preview some of the tools that we use, and we're going to see how this goes. We're going to have it on this screen, and we'll try to kind of pull it in front so hopefully you guys can all see. But since I've been here at least, we've had a partnership with this company, Barriger Systems, and they're actually out of Canada, which is kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure how we got hooked up with them originally. They have some district customers in Illinois, but this is what they do. They work with school districts to do enrollment forecasts and to assist with mapping boundaries. So we license software tools from them, but they also have a team of statisticians and demographers who actually help us with our enrollment forecasts. So they look at things like, I talk a lot about births. They're the ones, they get their hands on the birth data as soon as it's available. And we know exactly how many kids were born in different areas in our boundary. And we know that is probably the most reliable leading indicator in terms of how many kids we're going to get 5 years later is how many were born. Okay, so we know we have some kids who move in, we have some kids who move out. But if you map our kindergarten enrollments to what the births were 5 years ago, there's very, very tight correlation. And that's why when I say our enrollment, unfortunately, is going to decline for a few years, is because the births have been going the wrong direction. So we had a small kindergarten class this year, and it's going to be a small class next year, and it's probably going to be a small class the year after. We need to see those births start to stabilize, because when I get questions about, well, like, what about all these migrant students that were, hey, guys, can I get everybody's, there we go. When I get questions about like all the migrant students, coming from Venezuela and Ukraine and places like that, yeah, we are seeing more students than we have before from places like that, but that's a ripple compared to the births number. So I think that helped us maintain some of our enrollment this year and probably not lose as much as we should have. But our kindergarten classes are going to be small. We kind of know that based on birth data that's already occurred, okay? But anyway, my point was these guys help us get our hands on that birth data as soon as it's possibly available. The other thing they do then is they will help us model the impact of things like migration in and out of the district. They will help us model things like new housing starts. And then they've got all sorts of different projection curves and things that we can work through with them until we come up with numbers that we're comfortable with. But getting that part right, if we don't get that part right, we have no chance, okay? So we have to really get the enrollment forecast part right and then plan around that. So we really spend a lot of time working with them to make sure that we really understand where our enrollments are going, not just across the district, but even in individual areas of the district, okay? And then the piece that we'll show you tonight then is their geographic information system, or they call it GeoSchool, and that's where we actually draw the boundaries for our schools. It again shows where all the students live. It shows where our buildings are located. It's got all the GIS data like rivers and railroads and forest preserves and all that we can kind of work around. And what we'd like to do tonight, and I think, is give you at least a quick preview of that tool, just so you have an idea, kind of the tools that we have at our disposal when we go about doing this. We just want to make sure that you understand this is not slapped together like Excel spreadsheet and maps on a wall. Like we've got some pretty sophisticated tools, and we really are trying to apply all of the science and all the intelligence behind this we can. Because like I said, we've got to get this right. This is our chance to get it right in U-46, because districts don't undertake things to this scale very often, and when we do it, we've got to make sure that we nail it. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Mr. Mark Moore. Thank you very much.
I have done this work by drawing lines on laminated maps and Excel spreadsheets, and this is so much better. So this is Berger Software. They're the company we contract from Vancouver. What it has is this, for example, is the high school boundary with names on it. I'm going to declutter it in just a minute. You're going to see all these little red boxes around the side. There are some students who don't actually live in the district to go to school here. That's the red boxes. Those numbers are so small, you just ignore them. So ignore the red boxes. So what you're seeing now is the high school. We can also look at the current middle school lines. And here's elementary, and we're going to leave it on elementary for a couple of reasons. So here's the map without all the words on it. And this is where the ooh comes in. Here are the purple dots. So these are all the students in the district currently and where they live. And as Brian said earlier, the bigger the dots, the more people at that location. And it is pretty cluttered right now because it's showing the whole district, but as we zoom in, it gets a little clearer. And as you can see, there are all of these empty spaces, which, as Brian talked about, are various non-residential places, such as commercial, industrial parks, lots of forest preserve on the south and the east of the district that will never be developed. This whole plot up here is big forest preserve. Nobody will ever live here. There is this very dense looking development right here, and that was, Brian took the joke, that is a senior development. There will not be students there. It's a 55 and older place. Okay. So if we come over here, let's go down to where Hawk Hollow is, which is in the southeast corner. What you're looking at is elementary boundaries. So this section is Prairie View, and this section is Spring Trail. And within there is Hawk Hollow, which is where the elementary school was and will become a middle school. So what we do is this software allows us to just start choosing areas to build into a boundary. So I'm going to start by taking the Prairie View zone, which is this one. They call it cloning. So yes, I do. So I've now chosen all of Prairie View. I'm building a middle school boundary, and I'm using Hawk Hollow just as an example. And it's pretty clear that the neighborhoods that are next to Hawk Hollow are going to go to Hawk Hollow. So we're going to start with that. But that's definitely not enough students, because an elementary school is not designed, it's not hold 750. And then if we're only talking about 3 grades, we definitely need more than 1 elementary school. So let's add in Spring Trail. So now we've got a green and a blue. Those could contribute to Hawk Hollow. I'm going to do something they call merging. I'm going to merge them into 1 unit. So give me a moment. There it is. All right, so now I've chosen that boundary. And the reason I chose elementary is that that's an existing pattern, and that might be one of the criteria you choose in force feeder patterns. You don't have to. That's a choice you can guide us with. If I didn't want to do that, let's just say I wanted to go along these railroad tracks here, and say everyone north of the railroad tracks goes this way, everyone south of railroad tracks goes that way. I can draw a line and split that into 2 parts. Or if I wanted to cut along whatever this is, I could do that there, so you can crop. You can also draw any lines you want, so you don't have to go along roads or rivers or railroads, but those are natural boundaries. And going along a road is kind of nice for transportation since that's where the buses go. Although it's a little, not quite that simple, because in a neighborhood you don't generally on a residential street want kids on two sides of the street going to two different schools. So some roads make sense as a boundary and some don't. So I'm going to run a little report now. And I'm going to include, you don't have to read any of this yet. Go. This is going to tell us, in that boundary, how many current 6th, 7th, and 8th graders did I choose. It's also going to tell me how many 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders did I choose. And then you'll say why. And the numbers themselves don't matter for this experiment, but this tells me that in what I picked, there's 368 6th through 8th graders. So that, if this were the boundary for Hawk Hollow, there would right now be 368 kids in the school. Well, we're not doing it right now. We're going to do it perhaps 2 years from now. Well, those are the kids currently in 3 through 5. Same counting, 399. So in this area, it's actually going up a little bit over time. In 1 through 3, 2 years later, there's 415. That's not enough for a school that's a middle school. So then we go and find another area. Add in some more kids, run the report, see is it too much, is it just right, is it close to our target, which is about 90% of whatever the capacity of the building is. Obviously, we're looking at more than just counting numbers. We want to make sure that we have a acceptable arrangement of students. You know, do we have gifted students? Do we have special ed students? Do we have dual language students if it's a dual language school? All those different things, you can run all of that information. I'm not going to do that tonight for just example. So we iterate this process over and over and over and over again, using the criteria that you come up with. So if there's a decision to make, does this neighborhood west of the Fox River, mathematically it probably should go to this school east of the Fox River, but by criteria you say the river is a hard, or that's a boundary, don't cross it, then we'll find some other way to do it. So this criteria is how we make the decisions on where to draw the lines. So that's just a preview of the software we use. Of course, lots more detail behind it, but we thought you'd like to see what it looks like. So there you go.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and I totally stepped on his joke about the senior living thing. I couldn't help myself. So now we are at a point where we're going to start the work activity. So Carla, you and some of the folks in the back will be passing around the materials. Okay, so what we're going to ask you to do then, we're going to probably be joining some tables, so have groups of about 7 or 8 that'll be working together, and we'll be passing around and we'll give you some of the materials here. But here's what we're going to ask you to do, okay? Stick with me 1 sec, and then you guys get to talk for like the next 20, 30 minutes. Okay, so what we'd like you to do is get out the index cards with the ideas that you came to the meeting tonight with, or what ideas that you would like to see the district consider. And you're going to share your ideas with the others around the table. If you list one of your ideas and the people on the table say, "Ooh, that's a good one. I wish I thought of that one," and it's not something that was part of the established 10 criteria, please write it on the big sheet that we're going to be passing around. So that would be a new additional idea for us to consider. So after you all share your index cards and you jot down some of the new ideas that people at your table came with, then you as a group have to decide what are the top 5 criteria on your paper. So those will be, the ones that are listed at the top are the ones that I went through that were part of the work that was done previously. And then you'll have the items at the bottom that you as your table came up with independently. So you can spend all your 5, and you each get these little sheets of dots at your table. You can spend all your 5 on the criteria that we listed, and you say these are the 5 that I like the most. Or you can say I don't like any of those, I like 5 that we came up with on our own, and spend your dots there. Or you can distribute them evenly somehow, but you have 5 total to pick from on your sheet. I think we will start with like 20 minutes, and we'll see if that's enough time, and if you need more time, we'll give you more. But I definitely want to leave time at the end to hear from the tables. So be thinking about who's going to be the spokesperson and is going to share out at the end, because this is when we get a chance to hear from you. All right. We will pass out the materials now. How you guys all doing? You be ready to wrap this portion? Yes? I'm seeing some heads nodding. I'm going to take that as a yes. So I got enough responses. Okay, guys. So thank you very much. I was at several tables and I heard lots of really good conversation, lots of how should I say, strong opinions, I guess, right? But that's what we want. That's what we expected. So what I would like to do, if you guys could make sure tonight, leave all your both your cards and the flip charts that you did at the tables, because we want to make sure that we collect this and sort of memorialize all the feedback that we got tonight. But now, what I want to do, we want to get you all out of here on time, and we're getting up close to 9. But I do want to spend a few minutes hearing from at least some of the tables that want to share with us the discussion that you had and some of the priority items maybe that your group came up with that you would like and expect the district to follow as we go about this process. Heather is never shy, and so thank you very much. She was the first volunteer. She's going to kick things off. And if you guys could, though, what I'd ask, since it's almost 9, just try to be pretty quick, like just a minute or something at each table, and think about who's going to be your spokesperson, and let me know who'd like to be next, but we'll start with Heather here.
The number one thing we talked about was class sizes. We felt that was a really important component of equity, and we wanted to make sure the boundaries were not going to create larger class sizes that really impact student experience and outcomes. And then the other big thing was the feeder school alignment. That really impacts relationships. And then the other thing was distance and travel time of students from a school. But those were our top 3.
Some of our kids are on buses for anywhere from 90 minutes a day to sometimes 2 hours, just because of potential wait times. You know, the bus doesn't pick up till 4:05 from the school, and then you're on the bus for 50 minutes after, etc. But what we really want to see, there's a lot of anxiety in this, and I think we all feel that anxiety right now, and so that transition to the new school as soon as possible, or transition this, is move this along as fast as possible so answers are done, because, you know, for example, a lot of us have the class of 2029, that social emotional side, they're all trying to figure out, you know, am I going to go to the high school? Am I going to go to what am I going to do? And their siblings are following them, hearing the same thing. So I think that anxiety of where everybody sits right now is super important to make sure that we do this as fast and smooth as possible. Thank you all for coming tonight, by the way.
At Horizon School, we have 2 counties, we have at least 2 cities, and so trying to keep those within the same city and county. We also had a big discussion about student-to-teacher ratio. Just because you're at capacity doesn't mean that you have low student-to-teacher, and that is key, I think, for all of us, and discipline and all that great opportunities for our students. There was a lot of things in the 2010 or 29, whatever it was, that we felt were very similar, and let's combine those and bring in some of these other ideas that we've shared, but also want to keep up the diversity, because we do feel that our students gain so much from that.
Item was the distance of travel, which is sort of similar to proximity, but really it's not. You kind of have to think of it as both, because, for example, right now I live in a spot where I drive right by Bartlett High School and then continue driving 15 minutes to South Elgin, and it makes no sense. So it just be rational about it, I guess, use a little common sense. And then also the idea of keeping the feeder school kids, kind of groups of kids together, whether it's neighborhoods or elementary schools or whatnot. We also firmly rejected the using certain streets or geographic features as boundaries. For example, a lot of us live around Route 59, and yes, it is a big street, but it's sort of a silly divider. It makes no sense. Buses are picking up kids from both sides in either way, and you know, you could maybe see a school, but you're not supposed to go there because you're on the wrong side of 59. It makes no sense. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm directing it to you. I don't mean to,
I don't know if I'm on the right or the wrong side of 59 right now.
Considering the safety of walking and biking to the closest school. I know that some schools are closer to certain neighborhoods, but there isn't really a safe route for those students to go to that school easily without getting, bus transportation provided. It may be geographically closer for a certain neighborhood to go to one school, but the feasibility for those students to actually get there safely needs to be an important factor too when considering the boundaries.
A lot of us have kids at Bartlett Elementary, and so right now Bartlett Elementary goes to Eastview, but it's the only school that feeds into Eastview that goes to South Elgin then. So those kids, they know each other, you beat all these other kids at Eastview, and then they're the only ones that go to South Elgin. And we understand, aligned feeder patterns are not necessarily our main goal, but maybe more evenly split. Like if Eastview split and went to 2 high schools, it wouldn't be just this little group that's being separated from all the kids that they've been in school with. Other than that, we talked about prioritizing facilities or programs, such as preschool and self-contained. And we talked about distance and travel time, and talked about how that really can be, that passing one school to get to another, but if, like you just said, if there's 2 schools that are not walking anyway, that can make more sense, so. Other than that, most of the things were the same.
We're going to summarize what we heard tonight, and we're going to bring this to our Board of Education together with some thoughts that we have. And we really are going to fine tune some of these guidelines, and then it allows us to really start to tackle the boundary work. So thank you very much. The next one of these sessions will be together again with CAC in April. So please watch for more information on that. We hope to see you all there. Have a good night. Thanks very much.